From Newsweek, Ron DeSantis predicts NYC cops will flee to Florida if Zohran Mamdani wins. I don't know about Florida, but Florida's probably a good choice. What do you guys think? You think if this commie wins mayor, the cops are going to flee?
Yeah, I mean, and why wouldn't they, by the way? I mean, it's already...
Because they're commies too?
No, most cops are not, clearly.
In New York, I think they are.
No, not even in New York. Come on. I mean, most New York cops are salt of the earth, wonderful,
POCs
patriotic people.
in New York, all the
I disagree. I think a lot of the cops in New York are commies.
I
think a lot of them are.
Strongly disagree with that.
I think a lot of them live in Staten Island and hate what the city is, but having lived in New York for 5 years and routinely interacted with NYPD, I think they're mostly default lib, and default lib is, to be fair, not commie, but when the communists get power and say, go do communist things, they go, okay, boss. Like when they painted Black Lives Matter in front of Trump Tower, and then 26 officers were like, you got it, boss. It's an illegal theft of public funds without city council approval, and they're painting a public message on a street which violates federal law, but we're going to enforce it anyway. Right. And then NYPD started arresting a bunch of people. Or how about when in New York during COVID, when they shut down churches and the cops were like, what was it? No more First Amendment? All right, we'll arrest people at the church. That doesn't sound like salt of the earth. That sounds like commie.
I will grant you that certainly there are a lot of compliant cops who are willing to obey against their better judgment, but that doesn't make them communists, certainly in their mentality.
When a communist says shut a church down and the cop says you got it, boss, sounds like a commie to me.
I don't believe that they're communists. I will say this, though. I think that it's very telling that the NYPD can't recruit people, right? That people do not want to join, knowing that they're going to be given an impossible mission to try to fight crime when city leadership, if anything, will take the side of the criminals in every judgment call and every occasion where it's in any sense not clear.
Let me ask you, why do you think it is that why do you believe NYPD cops are not communists?
Just from knowing so many cops and from
NYPD cops?
I've known enough, not as many as Chicago, of course, but yeah, I spent a lot of time in Chicago or New York and certainly know NYPD. But I think in general, beat cops, I'm not talking necessarily about leadership, but in general, beat cops overwhelmingly are salt of the earth, patriotic, generally very observantly religious people who do a really hard job and take tremendous risks for public safety. I think they're honorable people on the whole.
Wouldn't communists hire other communists to be police officers?
I mean, sure. Are there infestations of that? Sure. Of course there are.
So you think it was good, God-fearing men who shut churches down in New York?
Clearly not. But I think
then how? Like where were the good cops then to say, hey, you can't shut a church down?
I think unfortunately they were intimidated and compliant, and probably a lot of them were fooled into believing they were doing something noble, into believing the Fauci nonsense, and into believing that lockdowns were actually effective, and that this was for the good of the people.
Violated the Constitution. I mean,
I'm not defending any of it, right? At that time, contemporaneously, I was one of the loudest voices possible opposing what was going on. I'm saying a lot of cops probably believed the propaganda from Fauci and others.
Communist propaganda.
And
then marched in lockstep and enforced it, right?
But well-meaning people can believe lies if they're sold effectively to them. That's my point.
So like the Milgram experiments, when they had people believe they were electrocuting the other person and said, don't worry, I'm the authority and I tell you to do it, so it's okay. Mm-hmm. And then they had people on the other side screaming and begging for it to stop, and the doctor's like, no, you keep going, and they would just keep doing it. I think that's what communism stems from. Mm-hmm. So when you have a police department, I'll say this, the state troopers, a lot of NYPD did refuse to shut down bars in Staten Island, and NYPD refused to shut down a bar, so they'd bring in state troopers. But when it comes to the enforcement of communism, it largely has to be a Milgram-compliant group of cops. Mm-hmm. And so if you have, at the highest levels, the government of New York is largely communist. Mm-hmm. SDNY is communist. I'm saying that only a little bit tongue-in-cheek because they are actually enforcing these like Marxist theories and critical theories, but it's more of just cabal corruption. The mayor appoints his head of the police department, who's going to be a political ally, a commie, and that person's going to put other cops in positions of power who are going to align or do as they're told. Communism can't survive if there are actual God-fearing police officers who say, I'm not shutting a church down, good luck. Mm-hmm. Instead, what happened? The commies got power, and they said, no more church for you, and the cops were like, you got it, boss, just like that. Now, that person is going to hell.
Yeah.
No question. And if they think otherwise, they should. Well, maybe they can repent. I don't know. I'm not an authority figure on this. I just got to tell. I would assume And y'all can criticize me for this and tell me I'm wrong, but I would kind of assume that if you use the threat of violence and force against Christians who are trying to go to church to worship, that's probably a hell-worthy trespass, I'd imagine. Maybe I don't know. I'm a lapsed Catholic, so I don't really know much about what I'm talking about. But certainly seems like one of the most egregious things you can do is use the threat of violence against people to stop them from praising the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's what they did in New York. So I think they're communist. I don't think they'll flee to Florida. I think Zohran Mamdani will get in. They'll be like, "You got it, boss." And then they're going to say, "Take over this grocery store. We're turning to public works." And they're going to say, "Sure thing. No questions asked."
I think the NYPD has a very tough, very thankless job, but at the end of the day, they do what they're told in their job because they want to keep their job, they want to keep their pension, and that's their interest for the most part. So when you see people like the NYPD following orders like that, they don't want to lose their job because if they weren't following orders, then they would be fired. So
because their job is more important to them than the Constitution or their faith or their family. To be fair, I mean, it's reasonable, right? You got a family, you got a salary. Your kid needs to go to school. Your kid needs food. And the government comes to you and says, you will either do as you're told or you'll be in the pen with them. And that's what we saw when they went to the Jewish communities and started chaining the parks shut and shutting the schools down. They were spying and looking through windows because the Jewish community was trying to have, school and temple and stuff like that. And in Seattle, what we saw was there's a video I like to cite where Antifa threatened a guy, and they were all across the street marching towards him as he walked backwards with his hands up. Police pull up behind him, get out of the car, grab his hands, put him behind his back, and arrest him, and apologize to Antifa. And it's fascinating to me that, like, there's this generic conservative view that all cops are good or the police are good, and I'm like, bro, the Soviet Union, the cops were communists too. And in Venezuela, the cops, they're all communists.
I will say most of the NYPD are outer borough or greater metropolitan area cops that
don't want to lose their jobs, man.
Yeah, they don't want to lose their jobs. But most of them are Republicans. And I think it's worth saying, too, that everybody on the left in New York City doesn't think they're communists.
I don't know
they think they're all fascists. I know many of them aren't.
I'm going to say this. You made the point. They're having trouble recruiting because the reality is the good, God-fearing, conservative, Christian, or constitutionalists are refusing to join a communist police department.
Sure. Well, we've demoralized the NYPD, too. I mean, I think that's a bigger part of it. This was coming on the heels of, like, the defund the police movement and seeing, like, how when police actually enforced the law, the consequences that they had for enforcing the law, even when they're doing it correctly, that when, there's trouble in the subway, they're going to have to think twice about whether or not to do anything because they don't want to get in trouble down the line. So I think they're, again, being put in an impossible position and then being criticized from both sides.
And then when those lawyers were passing out Molotov cocktails, and what someone firebombed an NYPD van, I think.
Multiple during
they get a slap on the wrist and a sweetheart deal, and the cops are told nope. So what I see is happening is, look, 5 years ago during the riots, I was defending the cops who were trying to stop the riots, but it's pretty obvious what happened. These cops started quitting. We talked about this for the past the couple of years afterwards of departments seeing massive. They were getting defunded, and cops were quitting. And what did we all say here? They were replacing the good, conservative, constitutionalist cops with communists. And that's what they have done. So on the question of, will New York City cops flee to Florida? No, of course not. The ones that were going to flee fled a long time ago. 250,000 people fled Manhattan during COVID.
I don't know that that's accurate because Mamdani, with the whole defund the police stuff, and if he is actually going to have policies that either shrink the department or limit the department's ability to enforce the law, there might be more people that actually resign and decide that they don't want to be a police officer in New York. How many? I don't know. Will they go to Florida? I don't know. But I imagine
1%.
That he's not going to be popular with the police force.
And my point is that it's a small percentage of people that remain that hold those values. If you stuck around through COVID and shut churches down, then why would you leave now? When a communist comes in and says, hey, it's time to bring the boot down on people, you'd be like, just like we did 5 years ago. You got it, boss.
There's a whole slew of reasons why someone might leave now. Maybe they couldn't leave before. Maybe they had family ties that are no longer there. So,
that being the case, it's not about Zohran Mamdani winning is the point. If someone wanted to leave and they're saving up money to do so, it's irrelevant to Zohran Mamdani's win. My point is his policies, I don't think will have a substantial impact on the NYPD because COVID already did.
Here's what I would tell you is the difference. And I'm not excusing what anybody did during the COVID panic, right? And cops who enforced those draconian regulations were clearly wrong, right? I mean, egregiously wrong, right, in what they did. However, you have to remember, there was a national almost psychosis because there was such a mass panic that was spread with seemingly authoritative voices leading a very compliant corporate media that all did it in concert. Why? Because they wanted to defeat Donald Trump. It had nothing to do with public health.
Sure.
Nothing to do with the virus. It's because it was election year and they thought they could beat Trump. So my point is, though, most cops were fooled. Most cops were fooled by that mass psychosis.
And do you think communist regimes are any different?
Right, but the point is we're not under mass psychosis now is my point. And so given that, when Mamdani comes in and says I'm the newly elected Marxist mayor of, not that he'll say it, but I'm the newly elected Marxist mayor of New York, I think the reaction is going to be entirely different now from the NYPD than it was in 2020. And again, I'm not excusing them because they should have been more thoughtful, but the point is very few people were thoughtful during the lockdowns, right? It took a lot of guts, a lot of thinking to stand up and say, all of this is wrong. It's not based on science. It's violating the Constitution.
And every communist revolution or fascistic takeover is going to be predicated upon some kind of disaster or emergency.
Yeah.
So if you are not cognizant of these things when you are outright defying the Constitution, I think Let's if you want to be literal as we can be, will NYC cops flee to Florida? Yeah, sure. But what could that be? A couple dozen, maybe? I don't know. Would they go to Florida? Maybe not Florida, but sure, some might leave.
Yeah.
My point is, I think most of the cops of conscience left a long time ago.
That's a valid point. Yeah.
When they were told shut down churches, they probably went, hell no. Are you nuts? That's crazy. It's crazy what people did. Like, not only does it strike at the heart of this nation as to what the founding principles literally were, freedom of religion. It's the First Amendment, the right to peaceably assemble and worship as you see fit. And Cuomo was like, I don't care. I can do whatever I want. It's an emergency. And the cops were like, yeah, an emergency. And then they went and shut everything down. That's New York.
Yeah, an emergency.
That's right.
But let me ask you this. How about the other side of the equation then of those churches, the pastors who acquiesced overwhelmingly, whether they wanted to or not, right? There were very few brave cases. There were some, but very few brave cases where they said, no, we're not shutting down and you can arrest me. So, do you believe that all the priests and pastors are also communists? Or again, does my theory make more sense that they were falsely submitting to a mass psychosis and to propaganda?
So in Venezuela, the reason the communists maintain power is because they go to the national. First of all, starvation is a key component of how they maintain power. They go to the National Guard and say, your family will starve or you can do as you're told. And they say, yes, sir, I will not defy you, because they don't want their kids to starve. They don't want to be homeless. And so when the government says, shoot those teenagers who are protesting, they say, yes, sir. The cops, exact same thing. This is what evil is. People believe that the deal with the devil was always going to be he'd offer you a Rolls or a private jet and beautiful women. No, the devil's going to come to you, grab you by the balls and say, I will take your children from you unless you serve me. And they say, I will do anything you say. So the idea that evil forces took over New York, San Francisco, Chicago, New Zealand, all these countries. And I think we truly got to see who was willing to join the dark side and be evil. And there's always going to be an excuse. There's always going to be an internal justification for it. And when the Bolsheviks wage their revolution, the cops are going to say, look, man, if we speak out, my kids are going to be left homeless and I'll do anything for my kids. I will gladly serve the communists. And that's literally what they did. The priests, I don't really blame the people who have guns pointed at them when the villains are taking over with guns and saying, I will beat the crap, I will destroy your life. To be fair, though, I do think, especially for people, for men of the cloth, they absolutely should have said, you will not defy the Lord, and kept those churches open. And it does say a lot when they're like, a handful of guys have threatened me and my faith and my flock, and I will acquiesce. That's insane to me. Absolutely insane. You'd think of all the groups, they'd be like our law supersedes yours. And we're backed by the Constitution as it is. And, you make a good point. A lot of these guys were just like, okay, no more church. That's insane. Not to mention, a lot of these churches are flying pride flags anyway. Yeah. So are they really churches?
So they're not really churches, yeah.
Right. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.